morning, everyone. Good morning to our valued clients. We welcome you to this Leadership Indaba. It's a warrior talent initiative. We have started this program called the Leadership Indaba, and the main purpose for this program that we have started as warrior talent is to advise business leaders. We believe that as an organization, we have a responsibility to our valued clients in terms of advising them, in terms of influencing best practice. We come across quite good information, good practices that we can actually share with our valued clients as they run their businesses. The other point that I would want to raise is it's really to share with our clients new information, new innovations across the industry. As you know, we are in the talent management space, and we believe it's one role that we can really play in terms of sharing new information across the board. It's also to add value to our clients. That is the reason why we exist. We are there to partner with you, add value to your organization. Make sure that whatever you are doing, we make it easier for you. So this is the reason why we have started the Leadership Indaba, and as the name suggests, we are really talking to the kings, the queens of industry, people who are really in decision-making positions, who are really tasked with the difficult task of making some of these difficult decisions. And this platform or this program that we have started is really going to play a big role with regards to giving you valuable information. The themes that we'll be focusing on, it's really critical business and leadership themes that we'll touch on. Obviously, most of them will center around people management. We know that, I think we as part of our motto within the organization, it's a saying by Marshall Goldsmith where he says, knowing what to do is not the major challenge faced by executives. Finding who to do it is. So you find that we are going to really be focusing more on leadership topics that touch on people, because it's really one of the most important resource an organization has. So we will be inviting business leaders, experts from the industry, because we sit in a strategic position where we interact with different people across industries, and we know who the experts in different aspects in the talent management space are, and we invite them. Today we have got Dr. Herman-Jacobs. Our theme for today is the value proposition of psychometric and workplace assessment. So that is our theme today that we are focusing on. So we've invited Dr. Jacobs, who is really an expert in the area of psychometric and workplace assessments, amongst other things. I must emphasize that it's just one of the aspects that he's very good at. So we're going to be talking to him. I'm going to give him an opportunity, I think after 2 or 3 minutes, where he's going to introduce himself, introduce the organization that he's representing. You are talking to Fungai Mutize. I'm the moderator here, and Dr. Jacobs will be the one who will be sharing some insights into the psychometric and workplace assessments theme that we have today. Just a brief on Warrior Talent before I ask him to quickly talk about himself. Warrior Talent is an executive search, it's a recruitment company, it's an IT solutions organization. So that alone shows that we've got 3 divisions. One focuses on executive search, which is the Wakanda division. We also have Kopano that focuses on permanent and fixed term contract recruitment. Then we've got Kinako, also known as Warrior IT, where we focus on IT solutions, and that's where we've housed our IT placements, IT skills on tap. Our mission is really to identify, attract, and support the development of right quality human talent, and to create an empowering environment for candidates to make informed career choices. By this, we are already showing you that we have got clients who are business leaders who are looking for skills on one end, and we also have candidates who are also our clients. So these themes that we are raising, or this program is going to address both. So we are looking at our candidates, we are looking at business leaders, and we really want to support them with valuable information. I'll share more about Warrior Talent as we go. I'm going to talk to you about our strategic intent. I'll also share, with you the service offering that we have as Warrior Talent. But let me get to talk to Dr. Jacobs now and, get him to introduce himself, introduce QBIT, who is really our valued strategic partner in terms of psychometric assessment. Dr. Jacobs, people would want to know who you are, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself. Who is Dr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Fungai, and good morning, everybody. I'm Herman Roythorne-Jacobs. I'm an industrial psychologist, been active in the field, as Fungai also stated, more than just psychometrics and workplace assessment, but also involved in very other areas such as job and competency architecture, career management, and talent mapping is my other fields of expertise where I have a passion in. And I've been active in the field for over 20 years, and I'm also affiliated from an academic ad hoc capacity to the University of South Africa with the Industrial and Organization Psychology Department. A little bit about QBIT, the organization that I represent today. QBIT is a niche HR consultancy active since 2003. Our main purpose is to make sure that we deliver credible HR data for organizations to trust and to work with, and with data insights. And in doing so, we translate organization strategy into job and competency architecture. We are at job levels of work organization. And with that, we also then assist organizations with assessment modeling and building assessment strategies to support their workforce planning and their workforce development initiatives.
Well, thank you so much for that. One thing that just caught my attention as you've been talking about yourself is the 20 years plus that you've been doing this, and also the affiliation to the University of South Africa, which is really the experience that we are looking for in terms of then sharing with our clients, with regards to the theme that we are discussing today. As I said, our theme today, we are talking about the value of psychometric assessments, workplace assessments. Maybe let me get into the few questions that I've put together that will really help us, or that will guide the discussion we have today. And I think I must also say to our clients, if you've got any questions that you may have, please feel free to post them. Our team will compile them, and Dr. Jacobs will be happy to answer them. I think we are also going to share the link or the recording after this session, so that you can have the advantage of listening to it again, or going through it. And he's also going to share a presentation that you can then use in your organizations. What is the role of psychometric and workplace assessment?
Psychometric and workplace assessments traditionally have a very strong focus on the recruitment sphere, but over the last couple of decades, the value of assessment data insights that can assist organizations to really create the compatibility between their people capability that they have, as well as the organization capabilities, have really grown over the years. So apart from person-job compatibility, data that is nowadays extracted from assessment exercises very much assists the organization to really understand its workforce, but that also means, of course, that organizations need to have proper job and competency architecture structures. The design of the organization must be clear, because it's all about organization, people, capability, alignment. And then very important from a workforce analytics point of view, the role of psychometrics is also to really provide strategic insight for the business to take sound talent decisions.
No, thank you so much for that, Dr. Jacobs. And I think one thing that has been coming to my mind is really to say psychometrics, workplace assessments, are they the same thing? Is there a difference between the two?
There is a huge overlap, but there's also differences between the two. Like psychometrics very much focus on, if we look at somebody's cognitive ability, somebody's personality or behavioral, that's very much where psychometrics has really its foundations in. So, but when it comes to workplace assessments, although capability or ability and behavioral aspects play a role, workplace assessment is very much focusing on the functional or the skills part of assessments. So what we're really looking for is for applied competency, and that's why one of the examples that come to mind is if you look at the airline industry, for example, the simulators that pilots need to go through to stay abreast, to actually keep their licenses to operate. And one gets that in all spheres in the workplace. So just to summarize, the clear distinction is psychometrics, very much governed by the HPCSA, and FBAR also from a universal point of view, but it's very much focused on the cognitive behavioral part, where workplace assessment takes that into consideration, but it's actually more focused on my functional or technical capability.
No, thank you so much for that. And I think there's also the skills audit. I think organizations would really, want to know what, level of skills they have in the organization. Does psychometric assessment have a role to play in that?
Definitely. If I can just use an example again, cognitive ability, for example, is very much linked to the level of complexity that I as an individual can deal with. So we need to understand if the individual is occupying a certain job, whether the individual can deal with those complexities related to the job. And then of course from the behavioral point of view, now behavior is always an interesting topic, because there's the true self and then there's the learned behavior. And what psychometrics try to ascertain is what is the true self that the individual would display, whether it's liking working with people or working in a more autonomous fashion, which is also linked to the job, because we need to understand the behaviors of the individual for the job. And then of course the technical or the skills part very much linked to the job profile, typical requirements, or the organizational capability requirements. But during a skills audit, we need to understand the workforce, because the purpose of a skills audit is to ultimately lead to workforce development planning. And that is from a practical point of view crucial for organizations, because they need to draft workplace skills plans, which they need to balance the end of day with the annual training report. And they also need to look at the value add. What are the development needs or the strengths of my workforce, so that I can plan better from a placement point of view, and how to utilize staff also with given the requirements that the organization may have to support its strategy.
No, thank you so much. You've shared quite some insightful stuff with regards to the whole psychometrics and workplace assessments. Before we move to the next point that I want us to touch on, what are the key highlights, the key takeaways? Because you have mentioned quite a number of things. Key takeaways that you can actually just highlight for our clients.
I would say the key takeaways would be organization people capability alignment, to make sure that the organizational capability requirements to support its strategy and the people capability that's on the table have a match. And that often of course play a part in talent mapping as well. And then the second part, very crucial, is the credibility of my data, of my assessment data to inform my talent decisions.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Jacobs. We have been in this space for quite a long time. I think as people may know, Warrior Talent, we've been doing executive search, recruitment for some time now. And we have faced quite a number, or we have seen organizations face quite a number of challenges when it comes to assessment or assessment practice, or even the application and the use of psychometric assessment in decision making. And one thing that I've always encountered, or our team has always encountered, is you are giving a person this report, and sometimes it's something that they can actually challenge. So is this really me? There has to be a lot of challenges, Dr. Jacobs, associated with this, with the assessment, practice in general. What are some of those challenges that you would want to share with our, our clients, and and what comments would you, attach to that?
Yes, if I can just highlight maybe some of the challenges, and I'll try to address the scenario also that you state here.
Yeah.
Probably the greatest challenge from a business perspective, first and foremost, is the return of investment that I get from my assessment center. It is very important that the assessment practice needs to be well measured, that it's well costed, and that the results of that is also actioned. Now, if one would be able to draw almost a diagram, you would say that if I look at my cost of my assessments versus my cost of my training and development, and if I then look at the equation and say that should equal either higher efficiency from an operational point of view, or it should actually make sure that the organization grows in profits in terms of growth and sustainability as well. And that's often a big challenge. How do I cost, and how do I deal and calculate the return of investment? Because in practice, companies do invest a lot of monetary value into assessments, and therefore the practice need to make sure that it really truly adds value to the organization. Then the second part is the appropriateness of the assessments. It is very important, and we'll touch on it later on, I think, in the discussion, hopefully as well. But I think the important is that organizations need to ensure that their assessment practice utilize instruments that really brings value to the organization. So the appropriateness of the instruments that we utilize is very important. And that links, of course, with the challenge: how do I build my assessment strategy to support my leveling model that I follow in the organization, my job families, and my job output requirements. Then a very important issue is also my workforce and culture fit. It is important because I need to understand the culture of the organization, so I need to make sure that the assessment practice gives me that information that I can utilize to help me to better understand the culture that my employees have, the culture that I would like them to have, so that I can put appropriate interventions in place to deal with that. And then very important, the workforce capability profile is for me to understand what my workforce looks like, and it's quite a challenge because, especially from a recruitment perspective, we often get, and it goes links hand in hand with talent retention as well, very often we recruit, but we're not sure of the cards that we've already been dealt with in our companies from a workforce point of view. Now, where this specifically, if I can use a specific example, is very crucial, is on operational lines. Because if I'm an operational manager, I need to make sure that the capability requirements that I need to finish a specific task, whether it is to assemble in an assembly plant for the evening, or build something, or deal with something, I need to make sure that the capabilities that the shift will have will actually serve the purpose for what I have, and with that we also manage leave and so forth. I can't have everybody on leave with the same capability at the same point in time. From a strategic point of view, I need to trust as a business leader that my workforce, from managerial level, divisional leaders downwards, will actually be able to produce what is required and are aligned actually to what is required. Then a very important aspect is the weighting of assessments. That is a great challenge, especially both from a developmental and from a recruitment point of view. If I can once again use an example, certain behavioral capabilities like working with people may have a greater impact in the HR fraternity than it will have in the finance fraternity. Not that finance should not have it, but you cannot measure people occupying those two jobs on the same level for that competency. Now, weighting brings a challenge first and foremost from a practice point of view, and I deal with the strategic aspect in a moment. From a practice point of view, I need to decide, do I do weighting by competency or by dimension? Now, we found in practice probably the most appropriate method would probably be to go the route of weighting in terms of your dimension. So you really need to look at the job in the context of its job, family, and the level of accountability assigned to the job. Is it for me more important to have the cognitive ability versus behavior versus skills? An example again on operational level, your technical ability, and we saw trends in the market as well, great emphasis in the market nowadays to assess technical capability on your transactional levels, and therefore you will get like your cognitive ability and your behavioral capability will have a far greater weighting on your more senior roles in the organization. But weighting also in the recruitment space, the question that is a very interesting question because research is limited on that as well. How much weighting do I place on assessment outcomes when I take decisions? Yes. In the recruitment space, because I know that's also where Warrior operates as well. If I'm in my recruitment process, to what extent do I place a value on the assessment outcomes? Now, first and foremost, any practice leader in assessments will probably tell you that assessment should not be the basis upon which you appoint or not appoint, or take pure decisions on. Now, to almost improve that process, it's also important that we then say we add the dimension of functional capability as well, the applied competency. Because if the psychometrics, and it comes back to the mix between psychometrics and workplace assessment again, you actually up the value that you get from an assessment outcome if you add the functional applied competency as well. Because merely the cognitive and behavioral will give you limited insights. But if you also get the simulation part added to that, it gives you insights in more how appropriate the individual will apply the competency. Yeah. But even so, assessments in the equation of a recruitment should probably not exceed about 25% of your decision. Yeah. Yeah. Because remember, in your recruitment process, you will first go through the process of vetting the candidate. Yeah. You would go through the reference checking. You will have your proper interview process, your panel interviews. Then when you reach your decision on your shortlisting candidates, good practice is then almost from a developmental perspective to bring the psychometric assessments in the results and see, well, to what extent does it support our decision, to what extent do we need to rethink our decision. But even so, the assessments cannot be the reason why we appoint or not appoint. It just gives us insights into the individual's profile. The last challenge is, do I build my assessment solutions or do I purchase customized solutions? There's no right or wrong between the two, but that is also the big challenge that companies face nowadays.
No, thank you so much for highlighting that. And I think, like, one or two things that come to mind that I may just ask you to quickly comment on before we move to the next point. There's the part that talks to digitization and how that is affecting the assessment space. And also, there are new innovations, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure it's an area of business that is evolving every time. Would you want to comment, like, on that as well?
I can definitely do that, and I think with digitization, I think there's almost two parts. The one part is more on the practice point of view, on the operational practice. To what extent do I automate my assessment process without losing, it's very important, without losing the personal touch in the feedback. So the challenge is there, how do I build my solution in such a way that my reporting, the end of the day, still have the level of personalization in it, so that it's not just a one report fits all process. And then also the issue, and touch briefly on that, there is the challenge between what is an integrated system between a fully aggregated system. The integrated system merely takes assessment results still against certain competencies and gives you just a view of what the individual's profile is like, where the fully truly aggregated system will understand the assessment results, translate that back to the organization's competency framework to really truly give you meaningful data, you know, the end of the day, and also allows for automated calculation, because remember, in the contemporary world of work, your assessment data also, with due consideration of the POPI Acts, need to somehow end up against the organization's competency framework in your ERP systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
But of course, it's not the raw primary data, because then you breach the POPI protocols. But the other aspect also is the world of assessments is changing dramatically. The market is more and more flooded with gaming and gamification assessments. And then it becomes almost a blurry line at some point in time, because you have the HPCSA requirements for your psychometrics, and at the same end you have the gamification that try to mix almost the psychometrics, the cognitive abilities with the functional capabilities normally related to a topic or a role. Now the important is that the moment, of course, that a game or a gamification process, and I differentiate in a moment between the two, of course, as well, the two concepts, is that the moment it works with behavioral data or cognitive data, it moves then very much into the psychometric space. So there's a very fine line to understand how it works. But gamification is growing. I think the need for it is almost to take a little bit away from the traditional way of doing assessments, whether it's paper-based or automated, versus gamification. Now, gamification, of course, is a construct dealing with, I'm taking an existing standardized instrument and I build then a game, an assessment game on top of that instrument. Versus gaming, which is we build an entire new assessment purely on gaming principles.
No, thank you so much for that, Dr. Jacobs. You've mentioned quite a number of things. It's something that I'm going to do every time we touch on a sub-theme. Just major highlights that, should be takeaways for our clients with regards to what you've just everything you've alluded to.
I would say the major highlight is that we need to have an assessment strategy.
Yeah.
With that we can standardize as much as we can. So we need to standardize our instrument or our assessment tool application as well to make it more manageable and cost effective, and to promote the Apple versus Apple comparative as well. We need to make sure that are we going to automate or not, and I think nowadays the automation or the digitization is very crucial. And then very important, the custom build versus do I buy off the shelf is quite important. And then more so is, do I want to have an integrated solution or a truly aggregated solution? Because at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is, can I trust the assessment data? Does it add value, not only from a compliance point of view, but from a value add as well? If business cannot see the value or the return of investment it gets from its assessment practice, then it is a challenge the business would face.
No, thank you so much for that, which is actually the next point that I really want us to touch on, because you have really emphasized the issue of return on investment. We have our clients who are CEOs, you've got line managers. They want to see the value that assessments are really generating for business. What is the strategic value of psychometric and workplace assessments?
Yes, I think some of the points I've already alluded to is that
what the main purpose, if I need to summarize the main purpose of an assessment practice, is to really assist business to understand its workforce profile. Because it is one thing for the business to have certain requirements and capability requirements versus the cards that I've been dealt with in the organization. So I need to understand my workforce. And what the biggest value is also is with that, I need to enable my learning and development divisions to really work with credible data to understand what learning and developments are required, because very often they also have a limited budget and they need to either design new programs or purchase in programs that they need to do. So it's very important they would rely on the outcomes of an assessment result, providing, of course, that result is directly related to job outputs, to the job family framework of the organization and its leveling framework, of course, and also the organization key capability requirements usually reflected in the job family framework. But it's all about workforce competency-based insights. I don't just want to know whether an individual can work with people or not. I want to know if this job requires a certain level of relationship building that the person must do, for example, in a sales environment versus in a service environment. That will impact how I look at the assessments, what I need to assess. And for talent mapping, that is quite crucial, because from a talent mapping point of view, the business wants to see what does my talent look like. Now that in a day-to-day operational aspect lead to operational efficiency as well. I already mentioned before, on operational level, managers need to sometimes match capabilities of individuals to the work that needs to be done at that point in time on an assembly line, for example, which can also apply in an administrative environment, of course. But on a strategic level, the easiest example probably to use is, and we as QBIT were involved in a client as such a few years ago, where a building society wanted to upgrade to a bank. Now you can imagine you need to understand your workforce, because the requirements for banking is much different from a building society. And that was actually in Botswana, where they needed to understand the workforce, and the skills audit was utilized for that purpose, and then relating the workforce capabilities to the new requirements, to understand the level of development that needs to take place. Because for them to register, for example, in that example, was they had to submit a report to their equivalent of the Reserve Bank to say, well, do we have the capabilities inside to be upgraded into a banking environment? So they need to understand, because the requirements are different. One of the other examples from a strategic point of view is, I want to grow my business. I want to expand into Africa. I want to expand into globally. Now I need to understand my workforce so that I know with the profile of the workforce what is possible, what is not possible, so that when I do recruitment, we also find the contribution to talent acquisition is also far more effective if I know from a targeted point of view what I'm looking for and what I don't have inside. So it just helps to understand that point of view, of course, as well. So it's all about workforce competency-based insights, and I just want to stretch that as well. You actually cannot have an assessment practice running in your organization if the organization does not have a leveling framework, if the organization does not have a proper, robust job competency architecture in place, because that is your measure against which you will do the alignment of all your practices in that as well. And I think if I can highlight again one or two takeaways from a strategic point of view, is really workforce competency-based insights to understand my workforce. My integrated approach. I must know that my assessment data speaks to my job and competency architecture, supports my organization design and my strategy. And that is quite important because that is almost my management tool to manage my workforce capabilities, and it will give me greater insights into what I need to recruit for.
No, I like it, especially when you say, you know, from a learning and development point of view, you are not just designing generalist kind of training programs. Now you can actually make them more specific. You know, issues of recruitment, you know, whether we should bring from outside or whether we should build from inside are quite critical for business. No, thank you so much for that. I want us to move to human capital management, because they are the custodians of this. They are the ones who are really interpreting this to business and helping business to understand, like, you know, the value of psychometric assessments. What is the value of assessment practice in the context of human capital management?
Yes, I think the previous section we spoke about what, from a business perspective, probably the value that it can add.
Yeah.
Now, from the human capital management perspective, and I'm not going to go into the actual operational running of an assessment center and the assessment practice.
Yes.
In the context of this, what is the value if I'm the HR executive?
Yes.
And I need to practically look at my assessment practice and I need to say, well, given what the business requirements are, given I also have a human capital strategy that I need to drive, what would I expect from my assessment practice? Now, from a human capital perspective, if I need to look at performance management, I need to look at remuneration and rewards, I need to look at learning and development, talent acquisition.
Yeah.
For me, workforce profiling and talent mapping will be crucial because I need to have an understanding of the workforce so that I can execute from an HR strategy point of view what is required. And what's also important is I need to make sure that the assessment results can contribute both psychometrics and workplace assessments together with performance outcomes to my workforce skills planning. So once again, I can't only use assessments to predict my workforce skills plan. I also look at performance management and various crucial discussions that may happen between managers and employees as part of the processes. There may be 360-degree assessments, part of the performance process, run by the assessment center as well. So all that needs to be collated. And I, as an HR manager, need to understand and considering all those factors, what is the profile of my workforce? Because I need to decide who would be mentors, who would not. Where's the strength? I mean, if you look at it from an HRB point of view, or a human resource business partnering point of view, if I, as the HRBP, sits with the business, I can only really strategically add value if I understand the workforce in that business area. Because then I can say, why do you want to recruit for this? Do you know there's XYZ that could be possible internal candidates for that? So it almost helps with that. And of course, with that goes also the employment equity aspect, to make sure where does our skill sets lie? How does it look in terms of our employment equity sphere? To focus just the development on that. And then very much the issue of practice integration is also important, that the assessments do not happen in isolation. I already alluded to job and competency architecture, touch on some of the other practices. It is important, remember, in practice the organization will have a central competency framework. It should have one. If not, it needs to build one or source one. There's the cognitive behavioral aspect and the technical competency library requirements. That forms the basis for our recruitment, our performance management, our training and development, because we also learn always that a common competency library or framework provide the common language for us to have meaningful discussions about talent. And from a practice integration, it doesn't help that we merely run a test center versus an assessment center. A test center is somewhere where people will come for assessments when I'm recruited. I'm going to the organization, do assessments, and the report hopefully doesn't get filed, but it gets filed somewhere away. Then 2 months down the line, the manager sent me again for assessments to the assessment center. They merely run assessments to me and give feedback. It's almost on a request or a needs based. Where a fully blown assessment center will try to integrate its practice. It will have a proper assessment strategy, a proper assessment framework and model that's linked and reported against the competency framework of the organization, whether they built it or whether they sourced it in. And that's about strategic assessment modeling. Now, one of the big factors, of course, that influence it from a human capital perspective is the human capital manager will ask, how mature is my assessment practice? So you need to look at your assessment practice. It does not help that you embark on a full-blown assessment strategy and you're not even a test center. You're not testing people. So, but what you still can do, you can at least standardize your instruments and your tools that you use across your levels of accountability and, of course, across your job families. I touched on the competency-based assessment strategy. The assessment strategy does not come before the job and competency architecture. It can run simultaneous, hand in hand, because people may ask, but does it mean I need to stop my assessments? While I know, we don't say that. So there's two parts. Almost on the basic or fundamental part, you need to standardize your assessments. Just make sure you get apples compared with apples. Don't use multiple tools that measure the same competency, because they measure differently. And you will be comparing apples with pears in some instances. But the assessment strategy needs the competency library. Whether the organization source it in, there's many ways organizations do this. In practice, sometimes organizations source a reputable assessment supplier in and make that competency library their own, get customized for them, and then work with that. Most organizations, though, build their own, and even if they source, it needs to be customized, because when I get assessed against an instrument base, although those competencies are well researched, it needs to be understood in the context of this organization, because this is where the employee will be active and where the people will be active in. So that strategy part is very critical there. And then once again, the meaningful data analytics. I can't just have an assessment center that tell me how much do I pay for tests and what happened. It needs to be meaningful analytics. If you have a strategy and an assessment model, you can actually revise that, as you would do with strategy from time to time. Do we get value? So it's a lot of emphasis on the value add, apart from the compliance part for that. But I guess the maturity level of the practice is important from a human capital point of view.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And you know, one thing that really comes to mind is you have been sharing, you know, this the critical information and the level of, like, you know, information that you've just shared with our clients is really the part that talks to the skill that, like, you know, is required to be able to really do this, and to, you know, for a HR executive to have, you know, a competent specialist in this area who can be able to give, like, you know, that comfort. Do we have enough skills, like, you know, in this area in South Africa? What would be your comment with regards to that?
I would say I don't think the skills in South Africa is so much the challenge, as it is more from a different angle. When an organization or an HR executive need to decide on how to manage the assessment practice, they have two options, literally. And we see tenders in the market for this. Either I outsource my assessment capability, which makes sense, because if I'm not an assessment organization, I'm not an assessment supplier, the question is it really worth my while to run the practice inside? Because it's not my focus, my business focus. But I can outsource it to a reputable supplier out there that can do an integration or hopefully an aggregated solution.
Yes.
Now the challenge with that, before I get to the in-house part, the challenge with that is if you outsource it to a particular supplier, assessment supplier, your challenge will be how do you get other suppliers that's in competition with that supplier in the market to aggregate and share their scores in there, because although the organization that you outsource it to is doing it under your umbrella, one of the challenges, for example, is that organization you outsource it to can't be the ones to approach the other suppliers. You still need to in-house manage your strategy. Somebody needs to manage that strategy, because on behalf of the client, you need to engage with the suppliers to get them to share, and they may even walk away or not. So there's some very friction there. But is it workable? Yes. It just takes a huge of challenges, because very often the organization that you outsource the service to needs to first understand your own IT security regulations. Imagine you're a bank. So there's an awful lot of customization involved in the outsourcing of an assessment center. But we see that there's tenders in the market frequently for people going that route, because it is from a management point of view, they deal with one entity instead of with 12 suppliers that may be on your assessment matrix, depends how you build it. But on the other hand, let's examine the in-house option. The in-house option sounds feasible, because I will have control over my competency library. I can go and I can contract directly with the suppliers. The challenge, however, is you need to somehow insource the expertise that an external provider may already have. So at the end of the day, it is debatable what the cost saving would be. So insource give you more control, but will definitely challenge you from a capability framework, and not only in the assessment practice. You then need to get your own IT divisions to build the interface between your assessment system and your ERP systems, where very often the bright side of an external supplier doing that aggregation for you is again that they have already often the built-in capability, for example, to push and pull data through the APIs. Where in-house you need to build that capability. Then the question is, does my in-house IT division have the capability to do that? If I can use an example, there is a technical supplier, for example, on the market. When they needed to integrate with another supplier, suddenly that supplier says, we only accept instruments that run on Cold Fusion. And then they find they don't even themselves have that capability and have to insource. So it sounds feasible to run it in-house, because I have more control over it, but experience have shown that organizations going that route. I don't say it will be, because there may be organizations that have the expertise and can source it in. But the challenge is they often start out wanting to build an assessment center and end up with a test center. Because it is just, so therefore the outsource route is more likable, I guess, in the market, but it has its integration challenges, because then you need to, as an organization, still manage, and I think that's important takeaway from this as well. You cannot outsource and think you abdicate your assessment strategy. You must still have your own assessment strategy. Then what you will see when RFPs come out, they sometimes often clear what is required. Depends on the maturity level of the organization, because what instruments we'll be using and how we will use it, that is the ownership of the organization's assessment. And that's for human capital here. So the outsourcing goes after that. You can't sit with an external supplier and say, you know, sure, they can help you and advise. QBIT does it often as well, where we sit with organizations, unpack their requirements, because we're instrument agnostic or neutral, and then we say to them, let's build your assessment matrix. And then once you know that, then you can go out on RFPs and look and see what assessment suppliers there are that will serve your needs against your competency library.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Jacobs, for sharing, such insights. Maybe quick highlights as we've been doing. You've spoken a lot about a number of critical stuff. Just quick highlights, takeaways for our clients.
I think from an HR or a human capital management perspective, if I truly want to create or to deliver meaningful assessment data that the business can utilize and that I can utilize in my human capital strategies, I need to make sure that I have those capabilities in my organization to actually deal with that. And very often organizations, of course, also very often will, there's many out there, there's Power BI, there's OrgView. Very often organizations have an analytics tool that they utilize. So a lot of effort is often spent that analytics tool, and maybe I must just add that as well. It is not expected of the assessment center to produce a tool like an OrgView or a Power BI. They must just add the value add data. So very often the output of your assessment practice must just add into those processes together with other business data to make human capital decisions. But if I want to do that and I truly want to integrate with other practices, assessment strategy framework needs to be in place. There needs to be a standardized framework dealing with recruitment and how do we deal with development here, so that we get apples with apples comparison at the end of the day.
No, thank you so much. To our valued clients, as I said, our theme today, the value of psychometric and workplace assessments. I also promised that I will be sharing some, information regarding warrior talent. The purpose really for us doing this is to advise, to influence, to share, new innovations, add value to you as our clients, which is really true to our strategic intent as warrior talent. And our strategic intent, says, or talks to the growth of high-functioning individuals. We also talk about ensuring that our clients have the right people in the right positions at the right time throughout the organization. So we really are staying true to this, and we also say we are in the business of providing innovative business solutions in areas of workforce management solutions, productivity improvement, community development and transformation, decision coaching, and leadership development. So it's something that is really at our heart, and we are staying true to that. Then the last one is really creating an environment that demands that everyone focuses on client needs. So as warrior talent, that is really our strategic intent, and we are doing this to really focus on your needs as our clients. Moving back to what we are talking about, the theme for today, let me ask Dr. Jacobs to touch on solutions that he can give to or he can recommend to our clients. Yes, we have spoken about a number of things, from the role that psychometrics play. We touched on the challenges that are there in this space. We also spoke about the strategic value to business, and how HR can actually manage the assessment center and data analytics and so forth. Now you have been in this space for a long time, and you may have some recommendations with regards to some solutions that you think our clients can actually consider when it comes to this space of psychometric and workplace assessment. What would you say?
Yes, I think I want to start this part of the discussion with a food for thought example. And I would like the audience up there to imagine this. You have 10 senior accountants. From those 10 senior accountants, you need to select your next CFO. Now this paradigm may apply to selecting the next CEO, selecting the next, from an internal talent pool. There are 10 potential candidates. Doing well from a performance point of view, their names have all been recommended. You need to decide. Now you look at the assessment data. The assessment data show that candidate A has a strength when it comes to cognitive agility and the ability to work with numbers. The same goes for candidate 2, candidate C, for example. So B the same. C is not so good at it. They had a development need in it. And then you think, well, what I would like to do is I want the CFO to really contribute to my business strategy. They must have meaningful relations. So the cognitive agility is a bit of a flag. And so you go on through the whole range. Now the question that you ask is, do I trust this data that I look at? And then when you look deeper, candidate A and B were assessed, to put it bluntly, I'm not promoting any tools, I'm just using this from example point of view. Candidate 1 and 2, or A and B, has been assessed on the CPP. Candidate 3 and 4 has been assessed on the COPAS.
Yeah.
And there's different varieties, psychic ability assessments, some of the people. When you look at the behavioral, you see the same pattern. We don't have a standardized assessment strategy. Now the question comes the same with the behavioral. Some have done the SAVL, some the OPQ, some may have done the Psytech 15 FQI or whatever is out there. Now it's a problem. Because those numbers that I look at and say these people are the development need, proficient, I now suddenly cannot trust those numbers. Because the problem is that I don't have a standardized assessment. I cannot compare apples with apples. Although the competency they reported against is the same, the construct definitions of those assessments differ. So what do I need to do? I need to put these 10 candidates through another set of assessments to get the apple by apple. And what I actually done is I wasted money because I couldn't use or reuse the data. So that brings me to one of the important considerations. If organizations truly want to save costs from an assessment point of view, they must consider how can I reuse existing data, but that I can only do if I have a standardized assessment strategy and an assessment model. Because then I can reuse data. Picture the scenario that I've just created versus this one. We have 10 accountants. They've been all assessed before on a certain battery of assessments for senior accountants.
Yes.
We checked in the assessment center because it's part of their job to tell us if data is valid.
Yeah.
They checked with the suppliers, the data is valid. All I have to do is if I have an aggregated system,
Yes.
I can rerun the same assessment data against the CFO job profile. I don't even have to reassess a single person, providing the assessments were of course valid and reliable. Now picture that cost saving. I can only reuse data and remodel it against the higher level of job versus having to retest. Because the instruments, of course, this is of course the other scenario.
Yeah.
If I look, of course, at my assessment strategy, that is also providing that those were the instruments I allocated to both those levels of work.
Yeah.
In other words, if I've decided, for example, that the saddle wave is my instrument on a level of work 3, but on level of work 4, it's the Hogans. If then the candidates apply, at least they need to do the Hogans, because that's for that level of accountability. But I may find that I use, for example, the CPP in both those levels. I don't have to retest in that. So it's a far more economical way, but once again, I need to have an assessment strategy. And I touch on the aggregating part. I don't just want to know in terms of this job or how does Herman scores integrate. I need to have it aggregated against the organization's job requirements so that I can reuse data, that calculation can also be done automatically. I can rerun the data and I get it against that data levels. And of course the biggest aspect is the challenge of the outsource versus insource. That is a difficult one. I cannot say to organizations. Unfortunately, if I have a magic wand, I should have been able to, but I don't. Or if I look in a crystal ball, as people sometimes say, when you look assessments, it's like you look in a crystal ball. And all the aspects is like it's almost like a tapestry in an organization. If I look at my data, my assessment data, my performance data, and everything should give me the tapestry of my workforce profile. But the thing is, do I insource, outsource? I would say that very much depends on the level of maturity of the practice and whether or not the organization believes it has the adequate resources or can source it in. And the only important point is outsourcing your assessment practice is not abdicating your assessment model and strategy. That you don't get out of.
No,
but that is the...
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacobs. I think we have heard it for ourselves. Assessment strategy is very, very critical. There's something that I forgot to ask you, I think, when we were talking about challenges, and I think we would have done a disservice to our clients if I don't ask this. There's a lot of perception, around psychometric assessments. When tests are done, there's this belief that they tend to favor certain, groups of people, or it goes with your background, and sometimes you've got certain groups of people who do not perform well because of historic, disadvantages. What is your comment on that?
Yeah, I'm going to try to answer it the best that I can, because we're dealing with almost two sets of practices. There's the practices under the previous dispensation, and there's the modern day practices. But to your point, that is the purpose of the HPCSA and the FPAS of the world, is to make sure, what does it mean when we say a test needs to be accredited? Because I think the challenge is there's a lot of assessments on the market. There are assessments that you can literally buy a booklet. Many of the people may know what I'm talking about, and it's a good assessment. You can buy the booklet, you get the score and the key at the end, you do it, and it's wonderful. Now that is for developmental purposes, so they don't really bridge, they will be accredited with some or other body somewhere. But the importance of it is that psychometrics traditionally used to, it's also a big debate, of course, I don't want to go now in that, but part of its legacy is how it was applied in practice. I'm going to sketch a scenario when the industrial psychologist sits in the midnight hours and they score an assessment to report it. Nobody is sitting with them in the room. The assumption is they are accredited and they have the ethics to apply the manual. You can't score an assessment without rules. This is the reason why there's a manual. Now I'm not going to go in details, but in the past experiences way back, to favor certain groups it was easy. It's not the instrument. The instrument had the table, a norm table for black candidates and a norm table for white candidates. Now if I do the assessment reporting and I ignore the black, nobody would know. And then I skew the results. And there were many things, I think if you look almost on your more of your virtual type of assessments, there were horrible things where people use thematic apperception type of methods in showing people cards and all sort of things to get things out. I'm not going to go into detail, those instruments are not being used anymore. And then the big thing is, for me to go into the nowadays one, a lot has been done. First and foremost, the tests need to be standardized for South Africa. If I can ring fence it. So if a supplier comes to you and they say, look, I'm very reputable worldwide. Well done. But you need to show me your South African data at least. And this is a challenge maybe that I want to put out to the fraternity out there, because we've encountered it from our sides as well, in practice and in that. How do you define the criteria
Yes.
to accept a test, because there's good tests in the market, because the organizations are between two spheres almost. The one is I need to get what I want from the psychometric specifically. Workplace assessment not so much, but I'll touch on that as well. But from the psychometrics, I need to get my value out of it. That needs to be accredited and it needs to be applied. But how do I deal with opening up research opportunities for organizations that want to invest in South Africa psychometrically wise, but they need to build norm groups? Now, of course, that can be done, but the HPC is very clear on that. If I need to take a decision on talent, I cannot utilize a psychometric assessment that's not accredited. So one mustn't confuse that with I'll open it up for developmental purposes to help you build data. If it works and you get the assessment registered, and companies often do that, they will invest with a supplier, partner with them, because once that assessment is standardized, it can move on to their assessment platform. So it is not wrong to do that avenue, but the regulations are clear. You cannot utilize those assessments for your decisions. But I think the norms is, I think in the modern dispensation, quite a lot has been done to level the playing field of the norm groups. So you will find that because psychometrics need to be accredited with the HPCSA, and it's not a once-off. Periodic, every few years, they need to resubmit their latest data. And one thing I know there's sometimes criticism. I will never criticize the HPCSA because their accreditation process is actually very robust. If a test is accredited there now, you can rest assured they dissected that data. And because of the South African environment, they place incredible emphasis on the population that make out the data. I won't mention now their name, of course, for legal reasons. There was an overseas supplier many years ago who got to the last step, getting their test accredited. And believe it or not, they never asked the people what their population group was. So they were sent back to the drawing board after they pay their fees, everything, and say, you need to start from scratch. Because we need to know your culture differentiation. And I think a challenge with that also in assessments nowadays, and I don't really have the answer for that, but it's a challenge for assessments in that as well. You need to make sure if you embark, for example, on executive leadership, it's a bit easier because people are computer compatibility, people understand how it works, they maybe have done assessments before or not, but it's a different level. But the moment you go into graduate recruitment, you need to understand that the person that does this assessment may sometimes be somebody from a disadvantaged area, and they may have never in their life, believe it or not, opened a computer and things. So, and I think it touched also on the digitization part. There's a greater push nowadays for assessments to also be conducted on cell phones, of course, because that is what the tablets and so forth. Not all instruments are. So I think that's also one of the options going forward. If the organization need to understand who will be the target candidate population. Because when you look at your assessment strategy, you need to bear that in mind. You cannot go into the market with an instrument that nobody can open up, or they have difficulty with that. So, and you look at language issues, most instruments are not multi-language. I'm not speaking of absolute pre-transactional layers, because sometimes there are assessments for illiterate people, you know, what we call the, you know, when people do the non-verbal assessments where there's no real things to read, but you need to bear in mind, so you need to check with your suppliers. Do they capture the language, the home language of the person, and how will you deal with this assessment? So I said, no, it's not so much an issue on executive layers, but the moment you go into layers down on operational level, you will encounter that aspect. But the big advice that I can give organizations, there's a fine line between the two. Try to shift from an integrated to a truly aggregated platform method to deal with your assessments.
Dr. Jacobs, thank you so much. This brings us to the end of our program. But before we cut it off, let me just share some of our service offering as Warrior Talent with our clients. So we do executive search and skills search. If you are looking for executives, we have got experience across the board, across industries. We do board member placements, so trials, we help you. Psychometric assessments, we've got credible partners. As you have been hearing us talk to Dr. Jacobs, we have helped a lot of clients, with regards to psychometric assessment. Interim management solutions, leadership transitional coaching, get in touch with us. We help leaders, coach them to add value, in no time to their organizations, to develop in areas of decision making, because we know that as leaders, one of the critical roles we have is really making decisions, and we help you with regards to that. Talent mapping, we do that. Permanent recruitment, we do that, and provision of specialized contract and permanent IT skills. We call it IT skills on tap through our Warrior IT division. So get in touch with us, we'll be able to help you. Dr. Jacobs, your parting remarks, your parting remarks to our clients.
Yes, I hope you found the session helpful.
Yes.
And I also just want to end similar to my learned friend here, that because we're in a partnering also with Warrior, it was a great, and I really thank Warrior also for the opportunity. But I also want to leave you with a little bit more about QBIT, the services that QBIT offer.
Yes.
And you're welcome, of course, to go to our website. We'll even advertise it, www.qbit.co.za. But very important is that also we offer organization architecture, job competency architecture, assessment modeling. We both implement and help organizations design. We do advisory services very often to organizations if they want to build in-house.
Yes.
But it would be good if you can visit www.simplymustard.com. We will obviously send you that link as well, just to get insights in how QBIT addresses the assessment practice and see what's available there. You can even play around on it. You're not going to pay the moment that you log on, so you can really go and just have a look at that, www.simplymustard.com. The main thing is, our main purpose in QBIT is still to ensure there's credible and usable human capital data that you can utilize with that. So we also, of course, assist with data analytics in the human capital environment.
Let me thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for taking your time, to share with our valued clients, insights into this critical theme. It's really a critical area for business nowadays. I think it brings the science to human talent management, and we really thank you for that. And to our valued clients, thank you so much for listening. We are going to share the link. We are also going to share the website details that Dr. Jacobs was alluding to, and this is going to be a frequent thing. We are going to really be coming to you with the different themes. We'll share the next one, I think, very soon. I think once we are done with the preparations, we'll then send you a flyer with details of the next one, and it will be I think as soon as early next month, and we look forward to chatting to you. We look forward to adding value to your organization, and whatever questions you have, please feel free to post them. Please feel free to send them to our team. I think there's Bonolo, who has been getting in touch with you. We've got Vera, who has also been getting in touch with you. Send them whatever questions you have. We'll certainly make sure that they are responded to, and we add value to your organization. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Have a blessed day.